Good morning. It is a great day on June the 2nd, 2020 to have a day of contemplation, a day of quiet. Today is Quiet Day at Caroline Furnace. We offer quiet days on the 2nd of different months, and today is one of those days. It is an opportunity for you, if you choose to come to Caroline Furnace, to simply be on our property. You can get a map and a guide to the day, some contemplative reading, and then you're welcome to be on the property, to sit by the lake and wander the trails, simply to meditate and hopefully go deeper in your relationship with God. If you can't come to Caroline Furnace, we invite you to have a quiet day at home, to spend time in prayer and meditation and perhaps in solitude outside, anywhere in your neighborhood or perhaps a nearby park. So I will be sharing with you now one of our opening prayers and the contemplative reading that will be available at Caroline Furnace for you to pick up and do on your own if you so choose to, today or any other day that suits your schedule. So I invite you now to, in a prayer of breathing, to simply take a deep breath. As you inhale again, inhale God's divine breath and realize that it's total gift. And then exhale slowly. The Spirit of God dwells in us all so that we may live. Amen. Our contemplative reading is a little reflection on some of the events happening in our society now, very brief. And then it's called a reflection on Ruach in Romans by a woman named Pastor Liz in Washington. So I invite you to listen. I noticed at our local peaceful protest here in Winchester, Virginia, this past Sunday evening, in response to George Floyd's murder by a police officer, that the chant said over and over again, as many of us have heard in the media, "I can't breathe," was said. Because that's what George Floyd was pleading as his life was being choked out of him. I know at many protests nationwide, the chant, "I can't breathe," has become a rallying cry for justice. Today we invite you to reflect in light of the divine holy breath that enlivens us all. We invite you to reflect on what a privilege it is to be able to breathe, and what a responsibility it is to use that very breath to make sure no one else's breath is unjustly extinguished. Here's our reflection on Ruach and Romans 8, verses 6 through 9. Have you ever stood in the forest and felt the breeze dance around you, rustling leaves and your hair? Have you ever stood on the beach and struggled to remain upright against the persistent force of the wind? Or have you ever felt the gentle breath on your cheek from a loved one when they are so close that you can feel their exhalation? One word cannot adequately express all of these. Sometimes our language is limited and inadequate. What we read in our translations of the Bible as spirit, wind, breath, are all translated from only one Hebrew word, ruach. Walter Brueggemann, a Presbyterian theologian and professor and amazing spiritual guide, says the Bible struggles to find adequate vocabulary to speak about and name this unutterable, irresistible, undomesticated force that surges into history to liberate, heal, remake, and transform. We are left with this code term, ruach, to speak about what we know but cannot say. Ruach is the wind that parted the waters and created dry land in the beginning. It is the very breath that God breathed into humans at our creation. It was this Spirit that parted the seas and allowed people to escape from slavery in Egypt. It is the very same Spirit that Jesus claims and empowers the early church in Acts, and that I strongly believe is on the move as we speak. This Ruach is active throughout our sacred stories and our current day stories as well. We are inescapably filled with the Holy Spirit from our first breath to our last. As St. Paul reminds the early church in Romans chapter 8, you are not in the flesh, you are in the Spirit, since the Spirit of God dwells in you. Paul is reminding the early followers of Christ that they too are filled with the breath of God, and so should choose life accordingly. Paul is saying to the people, you are filled with divine breath. Live like it. We are not just flesh and bones. We have divine, holy breath within us. We cannot fully live unless we fully recognize that we are also filled with the holy breath of God. It is this divine breath, this Ruach, that fuels our passions and animates our life. It calls us to action and elicits compassion and love. This is no ordinary breeze. This is no ordinary breath. This is our life breath. It is the breath of all living things. I invite you again in closing prayer to take a slow, deep breath. As you inhale again, realize you are receiving God's divine breath as total gift, and then exhale slowly. The Spirit of God dwells in us all that we may live. Amen. I hope you find peace and much contemplation and time with God today as you enjoy Quiet Day. Thank you for listening.